A Treatise of Satan's Temptations. Part 2. By Richard Gilpin. A Discourse of the Malice, Power, Cruelty and Diligence of Satan. Chapter 4. Part 3. Of Satan's second way of improving his advantages, which is by working upon the understanding indirectly by the affections. This he doth, 1. By a silent, insensible introduction of error. His method herein. 2. By entangling the affections with the external garb of error, a gorgeous dress, or affected plainness. And more. The devil, knowing well the force of external beauties in religion, prepared the way to idolatry by it. They had their costly temples, some of them admirable for antiquity and magnificence, enriched with gifts and offerings, excellent for matter and workmanship, adorned with images, lamps, beds, and tables of gold, beautified by art, and natural pleasantness of situation. They had also their groves in the most pleasant and delightful places, as that of the Daphne, besides Antiochia, which was environed with tall cypress trees, 10 miles about, and within adorned with the sumptuous temples of Apollo and Diana's sanctuary. In these places they had their music and solemn festivals, which were sometimes extraordinary for cost and continuance. Antiochus at Daphne continued an incredible solemnity, with a vast train and costly preparation, for 30 days together. And that nothing might be wanting, they had their annual feasts, sacrifices, rites, the adornments of their priests, their white garments, their coats of divers colors, their mitres, etc. In a word, nothing was lacking that might please the eye, or ear. And doubtless, the devil found this course very successful to win the affections of men to gentilism. And if it were not for this consideration, it might be admired that the Jews, who were instructed in the true worship of God, should, notwithstanding, be so prone to idolatry, and so hardly drawn from it. But surely their strong inclinations that way proceeded from a natural delight that men have in a sensual religion, which, by a powerful witchcraft, doth enchant them to an excess of love. The same method the devil takes in popery. The chief enticement lies in its glorious external appearance. All their religious places are dressed up in the highest bravery, they are beautified with images and pictures, with lights and costly adornments, they abound in rites, ceremonies, gestures, and observances, and all this is but to dazzle the eyes, and to win a reverence in men to their worship. And accordingly they practice in these exterior things on purpose to ravish men's affections. Their children are brought up to a confirmed delight and resolution for popery, by pleasing them with shows, pictures, representations, processions, and grateful observances. If a stranger of another religion come among them, then, as their first essay, they show them all their playthings, that their affections may be tickled with the outward pomp and ornament of their way, for they know by experience that a glittering outside, and a great deal ado of bodily labor, is the all of most men's religion. If it have but body enough, they never inquire whether it have spirit or life within. A dead carcass in robes, that may put them to the exercise of their postures and ceremonious compliments, doth make up a more grateful religion for a carnal man, than a living spiritual service, that necessarily will put them upon inward care and watchfulness, in the constant exercise of holy spiritual graces, without affording any considerable gratification to the senses. Hence is it truly more difficult, and yet inwardly more beautiful and glorious, to pray in faith and humility, even in short breathings after God, than to say 1,000 Ave Marias, or to perform a task of ordinary penance. But as those that have no children of their own, delight themselves in playing with a monkey or baboon, so those that know not how to worship God in spirit and truth, seek to satisfy themselves in the performance of external gesture and ceremony. 2. Secondly, on the other hand, he sometimes is willing that an error should affect an excess of plainness and simplicity. In this he takes advantage of those expressions in Scripture, wherein the gospel is commended for its simplicity. And the inventions of men, under the pretenses of wisdom, humility, and neglecting of the body, are condemned. Upon this ground he runs men upon such an excessive dotage, that they never think the things of God are rightly managed, but when they are brought down to a contemptible silliness. By this means he arms conceited ignorant men, with exceptions against learning, and the necessary decencies of language in preaching. And with them they are the only preachers, and most likely to be inspired, that use least study and preparation for their work. It is indeed very true, that the affected fooleries of a bombast style or starched discourse, and needless citations of sentences for ostentation, without any true advantage to the matter in hand, are things very pedantic, and exceedingly unsuitable to the gravity of the work of the ministry, and renders it very ungrateful to a pious mind. But this contrary folly makes the solemn ordinances of God so nauseous and contemptible, that it often makes way, by Satan's cunning improvement of the temptation, to an atheistical rejection of all worship. In the meantime, it is wonderful to observe how some persons please themselves with this conceit, that their way of worship is plain, and that they speak what immediately comes into their mind. And though it be nonsense or contradictions, which sufficiently evidenceth that it is nothing akin to the Spirit's inspirations, which they utter, yet it is argument enough to them that their opinions and ways are right, because they proceed in a designed neglect of all necessary order, and under pretense of the simplicity of the gospel, they reduce all they do to childish silliness. Neither is this all the mischief which the devil raiseth out of this conceit, for the contempt and disuse of the sacraments may in great part be ascribed to it. Those erroneous ways of worship that are most noted, for decrying those institutions of Christ, have this for their plea, that the worship which God is best pleased with is spiritual, and that all bodily services and external observations are things that God stands not upon, such as profit little, and were no further in use, but to recommend an internal spiritual communion with God, so that the more they reject these things, they persuade themselves they have a more true understanding of the design of God in religion. Either of these ways, Satan makes use of for the befooling of men into a humor of pleasing themselves with error. But 3. Thirdly, he hath of old endeavored to cloud and enervate the doctrine of the Bible by traditionary fables. We meet with many passages to this purpose. Sometimes he sets up unwritten traditions, not only of equal authority to the written word, but as completions and perfections of it. This he practiced among the Jews with such success, that the traditions of the elders were of greater force with them than the commands of God, as Christ himself noted of them, Matthew 15:13. Of these unwritten traditions, which they called the law by the word of mouth, feigned by them to be given to Moses when he was in the mount, and so delivered from hand to hand, the apostles gave many warnings, and signified the hazards that truth stood in by them through the cunning of Satan. As Colossians 2:8, beware lest any man spoil you through the traditions of men. 1 Timothy 1:4, neither give heed to fables, and endless genealogies. Titus 1:14, not giving heed to Jewish fables, and commandments of men. 2 Timothy 4:4, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. The papists at this day give the same entertainment to this device that the Jews did of old. They boast as high of their traditions, and are every whit as fabulous and foolish in them as they were. Satan in his attempts upon the Gentiles to confirm them in their false worship, though he kept up the substance of this design, yet he was necessitated to alter the scene a little, that he might more handsomely accommodate it to their condition. Therefore he set up amongst them fabulous imitations of the truths and ordinances of the Scripture, insomuch that there is scarce any grand mystery, or remarkable history or ordinance mentioned in the Scripture, but we may find something among the heathens, in tradition or practice that doth allude to it. What traditionary imitations had they, of the creation recorded in the book of Genesis? That of Obed concerning the chaos and first beginning of things, is known to every schoolboy. The Phoenicians in their theology give an odd account of it from their Tacitus, to this purpose, that the first beginnings of all things were a dark, disordered chaos, and the spirit of the dark air, hence proceeded moth, that is, mire, from thence issued the seeds and generation, of all creatures in earth and heaven, etc. Thanks.